What's up, Internet? It's me, Jake Coburn, and you are listening to another episode of the Quarantine Sessions podcast. I began to record episodes for this podcast at the beginning of the year 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the inspiration behind these podcasts was to provide a platform for the pillars and leaders of my community to share their voice and to help construct an inspiring narrative for people in this time of crisis, when a need for the upliftment of the spirit has been at its most urgent. This podcast centers around themes of art, creativity, spirituality, and psychedelics. And the incredible people I've had conversations with are all people who have bravely stepped outside of the conventional way of thinking and the conventional way of being and have transcended the matrix of the default reality, living life on their own terms. They are all people I respect deeply, and it has been an amazing opportunity and a privilege to speak to and learn from them. Most of these podcasts have been recorded live through Instagram, which is a new and somewhat experimental medium to conduct podcasts. I truly hope you enjoy this podcast and continue to tune in for future episodes. It's really a labor of love on my part, and thank you so much again for listening. Without further ado, here's the show. It was an honor to speak with Miles Johnston in this podcast. Miles is one of my oldest internet friends. We share the same birthday, not just the same day, but the same year. We came into this world, into this dimension, only hours apart. So I consider him like a long-lost, distant brother, and we've been friends for many years, originally through conceptart.org. And Miles is an incredible artist, a detailed and technically masterful surrealist who mostly creates with pencil and graphite. And you've probably seen his art before. He has garnered a lot of success and he deserves it. And this conversation was great. It was really fun to jam out on ideas about art and creativity and life and reality in general. And I really hope you enjoy this podcast, and you have to go check out Miles' art if you haven't seen it before, because it's incredible. So without further ado, here's the podcast. I hope you enjoy.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I have to say, you're probably like the fastest person.
Is my connection okay?
Yeah, your connection.
Hold on, I can't really hear you very well.
You can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
No, it's good. It's settled in.
Okay. Yeah, you're probably like the fastest person to jump on one of these chats, and I really appreciate your expectancy.
I was ready.
I wouldn't expect anything less from an investment wizard like yourself, and I'm really excited about all the wisdom that you're going to give us in these times when our investments are probably most important.
Hold on, I need to try changing my connection because I'm getting like only a couple syllables. I'm probably going to drop out for a sec. I'm going to try my 4G instead of my Wi-Fi. I'll be 1 sec.
Okay, what if I hang up and then we just go back on? Yeah, you're actually much clearer now. Before you were a bit pixelated.
Okay, what the fuck? Now my headphones have dropped out. Hold on, fuck it. Let's just go without the headphones. I'll technical
You sound
difficulties.
great. You sound really clear, and the video is really sharp too.
Beautiful. Wi-Fi is trash for some reason. I think everyone's online.
How's it going, man? How you doing?
It's good. I'm good. I'm in you probably read headlines, but I'm living in Sweden where they're not really doing like a full-on actual lockdown. it's kind of voluntary, but
Yeah.
staying inside and just drawing all the time is my normal routine. So I'm just doing that, and see, there's like a couple close friends we know are doing the same that I'm like comfortable to hang out with. Just we're all just in our apartments, and so yeah, and none of us see any elderly or vulnerable people. So yeah. How about you? Are you in
Yeah.
Bali?
Yeah, it's similar
Beautiful.
here. It's rather open. They have checkpoints where they have Banjar who are like neighborhood watch. It's like their equivalent of police, but it's a lot lower profile, and they're spraying people's hands with hand sanitizer as they like go past these certain checkpoints. And certain places have mandatory, like you have to wear a mask. It's mandatory, but other than that, life is pretty much the same as it was before. And I'm in a similar place too, where I spend a lot of time, but by myself, like working on art or whatever anyway. So my life has really not changed that dramatically.
No, yeah, I feel luckily, yeah, I just feel very like lucky in the whole situation. Like it's, I mean, the biggest frustration has been I released a batch of prints right before everything went down, and my partner is in Japan, and
Oh,
they have like a state of emergency and all the postage is stopped. So it's a little bit stressful. There's this large amount of people like I just hate having to keep sending an email every 2 weeks. Like, yeah, no, there's still nothing we can do. But everyone's been really understanding so far. If
yeah,
they're angry, they're not directing at me. So
yeah. Has it influenced your
I put
creativity at all?
I put a little
Oh,
star in for you.
wow, classy.
Do you feel special?
Yeah, cool, man. Has
You've got a lot more of the what's going on with the face tats and the.
you know,
I just got a little.
you're not missing too much, man. Don't
Life feel the
worry about it.
same.
You just keep drawing. You don't need any tattoos on your face. I think you're good.
I don't have any tattoos. I feel like I've left it too long. I'm still in that phase of like, oh, I don't know what the first one would be. It's got to be really meaningful, and because all my friends, once you've got one, you're just kind of in, right? I love tattoos. I just don't have any, you know.
I'm kind of like anything I get into, I get really into. So it was natural for me becoming interested in tattoos that it would just start to spread to every inch of my body, and I would go to those extremes with it because I tend to take my interest to that level no matter what. But
And it seems like you is like almost for the like ritual of going through it, you know,
yeah,
from what I've
absolutely.
read.
Yeah, I find that experience to be interesting. That confrontation with that extreme discomfort and this kind of meditation that comes out of that. It's taken my mind and consciousness to interesting places, and it's taught me that if we hold pain in our awareness more openly, that we don't really suffer as much. There's like interesting mind tricks you can play on that kind of experience, or when there's something that you can attach profound meaning to, it diminishes the experience of the pain as well. Like you don't mind going through something that's really painful as long as it's really meaningful for you. And
I
yeah,
think that's
that,
what I get.
what'd you say?
What I get from jogging. No, I'm like half
Yeah,
joking.
no,
It's
well,
less.
yeah, no, kind of. I mean, like I was on this like David Goggins kick for like a little while, and going on these long jogs at like 5 in the morning, which didn't last too long because I don't think that's really my like natural proclivity. But there is something. It's like he was doing the same thing, and a lot of people do the same thing with exercise. Where
Yeah,
it's
no, there's definitely something to. I always preferred like all the kinds of like I got into like weightlifting a lot 5 or 6 years ago. I was doing it a lot for like nearly 10 years, I think, and that was always about like getting a lot of adrenaline and doing something because I was like really into like strength training where you'd be like deadlifting or squats and it's over in a few seconds and it's like just like peak intensity. But I've been really into things like running now where it's like it's not that bad, but your mind just will not stop going.
yeah,
I just want to stop. stop. I want to stop. And like you just training yourself to be like, I'm fine right now,
Yeah.
and I'll be fine in a second. Like the only choice is like just holding some discomfort, and that skill comes up all the time. I think in making art, like half of making art is just it's not a peak experience. It's just it's a little bit tedious or something is taking a little bit of time, and just being able to, like you said, attach meaning to it and just keep going is definitely a skill that I feel like I mean like no one likes to do it, but it's just the classic like stuff your parents tell you, you know, eat your vegetables. Like it feels like it is good for you.
Yeah. Were you like a naturally really athletic kid? Because yeah, I know that you got into the strength training quite a bit. I remember seeing that. How did you get kind of involved in that stuff? I sometimes think about art and physical activity as being almost divergent, but I have met several professional artists that almost had careers as professional athletes and things like that. So I guess there can be an
Yeah.
intermixing of the two also.
I think that was maybe more of a thing. I feel like the whole sort of dichotomy between, you know, people who do stuff with their mind or with their body seems a bit like old fashioned. Like if you think about the sort of Silicon Valley aspirational culture, it's all
Yeah.
about, you know, looking after mind and body and whatever. And no, I did martial arts growing up. I mean, I always did different sports, but I never felt like particularly athletic, but I always enjoyed the experience of putting myself in a lot of physical discomfort. Like I quite like the feeling of more like I like the feeling afterwards. Like I tend to be quite an anxious person, and um, for me, it's like pouring Drano on your brain. You know, if you do, it's like I like getting into a physical state that's so uncomfortable. I mean, it's just, you know, it's like people who don't know they like meditation before. What I like about the experience is that you're not thinking. You're just, you know, in your breath or in the sensations or whatever. And but no, I got into weightlifting for all the same typical reasons guys do, which was I had like a big breakup at the time and like needed something to do. Like
Yeah.
I was really just sort of frustrated. But then I've just found it went really well with, you know, this is a very sedentary lifestyle sometimes. And yeah, I feel like it's just for my mental health more than anything. I really notice if I'm not exercising, I just become like a shittier person to people around me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just to the point now where like me and my partner, like if one of us is like really worked up, it's just like, just you probably need to go for a run, especially with us being inside all the time. I find I do, and I never want to do it. Like I feel like I am naturally a very lazy person. I've just kind of had to learn to overcome that. Like I still could very easily sink back into the slime and not make art and lay around all day. Like it's like I'm not someone who just has to be doing something. Um, so I'm always trying to, like, if there's something, I'm trying to practice doing the things that, you know, I don't want to do ahead of time, but feel good for having done. Like, yeah. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, I feel like the anything too, the word dopaminergic, anything that's too, things that feel good now, you pay for later. And then there's the other experiences you pay for up front, feel good later. I feel like I like those ones more in the end, or they help me to be a bit more balanced.
Yeah, I think that most of the strange things that we do are in the service of getting dopamine, you know. Like I've been
I'm that rat pushing the cocaine button to death very
yeah,
easily.
it's definitely a more it's definitely more positive to go on a run than to waste a bunch of money on cocaine. But yeah, I mean, we ultimately want to get high, I think, or like feel good. And so most of what we're doing is
This
for that.
last, yeah, like all the sort of feel good stuff is it's still another way to get high on the universe, but I feel like it's just better to pay up front. It's like don't go into dopamine debt. Is how I think about it nowadays.
Right. It's funny
You know,
though, because this is something I've been thinking about recently, because I've kind of been diving a little bit back more into Buddhism and meditation. I'm always interested in that, but like lately I've been listening to some books about meditation and stuff like that. And they really kind of stress the importance of doing nothing, you know, and that in a way all of our actions are trying to escape the fundamental experience of just being, which is unpleasant by itself in a way. And so we're constantly running after something. And yeah, I think that a lot of people engage in their work from that place. You know, it's like staying on this kind of existential treadmill continuously. It's like an addictive process rather than just allowing yourself to just kind of sit in the existential uncertainty or whatever that we're a part of.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a perpetual age of distraction that I almost think about doing nothing as something productive now. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel bad for sitting around doing nothing. It's more like the sort of numbing out of just browsing the phone or whatever. Like, you know, I feel like a lot, especially sometimes that like I'm really grateful for how fortunate I've been with my work getting around online, and it sort of in some ways is like, you know, enables me to make a living. It definitely enables me to make a living off my own art. But in other ways, it's just like so not good for me. Like I can feel how my brain has been rewired by like just just continuously you know, I have to continuously. It's just very seductive getting the amount of attention on your work, and it's very easy to like forget that the whole reason you do it is to do it, you know. And I've been thinking this year I've kind of been craving to take like a little I want to go like just book a hotel somewhere in the middle of nowhere and not bring my phone and just bring like some notebooks and stuff, and because I feel like I have the space right now to really plan some bigger projects for the future, and I kind of want to get my head out of this need to keep feeling like I constantly feel this anxiety that I need to remain posting new work and remaining relevant. Like it's all going to just disappear if I just like am not maintaining it. And so I kind of feel like I'd like to just go. Like I really want to, like my goals. Like I really just want to make the kind of work that has always like moved me in museums, like that kind of like historically good work. I just feel the desire to try and see if I can push myself to make that. And I feel like I need to get to that place. I need to get on a bit of a slower time scale. You know, like paintings like that take a long time to plan, and it has to come from some really authentic. It's not even just something you can just do. You need, you know, you need to find the idea that you want to express. And I sometimes feel like I'm numbing myself out a bit with this constant engagement and wanting to have. So I don't know, but yeah, maybe just taking a week and doing nothing but like thumbnailing and writing some stuff, or would be a good move. I don't know why a week, but it could be longer, it could be less, but. Or I think more realistically, it has to be, I need to like change my habits around how I engage with like social media. Like, you know, it's difficult because there are really positive things too. I love seeing that work is like speaks to someone, or, you know, it does feel meaningful to me when I can see that someone's really getting something from a piece. You know, I get something from artwork, so it's like, and I like talking with people. I think it's really fun just randomly like connecting with people in the comments and stuff. But yeah, who knows? Someone saying nature is potent in the comments. It is. That's what I need. I need to be outside, smell some forest.
Yeah, this is something I've thought about too. I mean, I don't have nearly as much recognition for my work as you do, but there's still there's a different orientation to it than I had when I was first starting out. Like when I was first starting out, it was totally just because I loved doing it, and I didn't really think at all about any kind of audience that was receiving it in any way, or having to uphold any kind of real standard, like the standards I set myself, but it wasn't like I had other people who were familiar with something I'd done in the past and would compare it to that. And I was a lot more experimental and free, I think, in the work that I was creating. Like I just didn't really give a shit and would just try different things. And, it was a lot more open. There's something kind of confining, I think, when you find some sort of recognition with your work, and then you want to maintain that. And so there's always some sense of like a fear of losing that or something,
Probably the same experience, because the main thing for me is that as the scale of things grows online, none of it really feels any different to how it used to. Like there's like a benchmark in your head of what feels like more attention than usual for people. You get the feedback of like, oh, people really like this one, or why don't people like this one as much? And the numbers change, but it's just the same thing. It's like the thing. Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, it's not something. Yeah, it's not something. Like I'm actually really happy right now as well. Like I'm really enjoying, feeling pretty productive and just enjoying making stuff too. It's more, I guess, I'm saying like if I'm looking big picture of my life and the kind of work I want to make, while I'm here, I feel like the only way to really like keep pushing that boundary is to do something different and take a step back. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's not a desire to like disappear so much as just like I've been really diving back into art fundamentals again recently, and like paying for like online classes and stuff. So like I took a perspective workshop with Carl Dobsky last weekend. That was amazing. I signed up for another of his, and like I got the Broco anatomy course. And what's so funny is it's going back to all these kind of presumed that I had learned, and just really trying to approach them as if I were a beginner for the first time, like skip no lessons. And what I'm finding is there's just these gigantic, holes in my knowledge that I've found ways to work around, but that have been, I don't know, it's just felt like whenever I go back and like really try to learn stuff, it just is always a very like life-affirming thing for me. Like I find it very anti-existential anxiety somehow to just get lost in learning something you care about. It feels really positive. Mm-hmm. And especially the perspective. I feel like that's been the main, like the biggest hole in my knowledge, because it's like to make like a complicated, larger painting with multiple figures or a more complex narrative, or just like more complicated spaces, that like real formal understanding of perspective has always held me back from that, and I've just let myself be too intimidated by it. Mm-hmm. And taking this course, I've just been sat around drawing grids in different angles and different whatever, and it's fun. It's really given me some ideas where I can feel things brewing. I can feel them bubbling on the surface.
Yeah, like learning is the best, and I think that was the funnest part about art when I was first starting out, was that it was this discovery, and it was this whole new thing that I was learning all the time. I mean, still hopefully, but yeah, perspective, man, that's something that I've also completely avoided. I took like one perspective class when I was in art school, and was just like, yeah, no, it's just not the way my mind likes to work. It's so unintuitive, at least for me.
I think the thing that made it make sense to me was at the end of the Carl Dobsky workshop, he kind of showed how he actually uses and applies this knowledge. So the thing that I really liked was, like, if you try to build an image from the ground up, from like a perspective drawing, the kind of mathematical precision of it is just going to put things exactly where they're meant to be, and you might end up with like awkward tangents. Like you said, it feels very unnatural. And what he would do is he really had a focus on designing the thumbnail just, you know, he's got perspective knowledge in the back of his head, but he's not drawing grids or anything to start. But he would get to the point in a thumbnail where I would probably just like now dive into the final image, and then he would take that thumbnail aside and build the proper perspective around it by like taking the angles off his thumbnail and kind of matching the closest thing to that. And then you can, it was really powerful. You can set a scale where, you know, a certain amount of centimeters equals a meter, and you can figure out how far back into the image different things are, and check that, you know, this house you've drawn is actually house sized and not too small. And then he would like build up with layers of tracing paper and make anything that needed perspective. If there's buildings or some, you know, very artificial objects, he would make them very rigorous. And then if it's like trees or human figures, you know, you're just drawing them from a model or from reference, because there's no point trying to build up a whole person that complex in perspective. It just becomes kind of insanely difficult and not even really the best way to do it. And it was this mixture of, it was just like this little extra trick added on. And when I saw him showing his sketching process, it was just this moment of like, oh, this is so powerful. Like I mean, it's like you don't even need to be drawing like anything complex architecturally, but just checking that the figures you've drawn in the background are appropriately small enough and moved for where your horizon line is. And yeah, so I've been trying to like learn that a bit. But the reason I like going back to technical stuff is that like I never thought I would end up being, you know, I used to like hate using the word artist to identify myself. I had that thing on like the forums where I just wanted to be like a concept artist or something in games, and like I didn't really look up to anyone who was doing fine art. I just wanted to be good at drawing. But what I found was that the more I developed that skill technically, suddenly it was like having this vocabulary to express something I didn't even really realize was there. And I found often that focusing on the more, you know, dry foundational skills just really like liberates yourself creatively, because yeah, otherwise it's like trying to write a book when you can't form sentences, and it actually limits where your imagination can go. Like you don't realize how much, if you know in the back of your head that there's things you're not confident with, like as you're trying to think of the kind of ideas you want to do, it maybe dismisses them quicker. You think, oh, that would be too hard, or I couldn't do that. And I just want to have that confidence where it feels like just total confidence that if you can draw it, you can, whatever it is, you can draw it. So now we can just think about what it's worth saying, worth expressing. And so I think it's like highly underrated how much you can sort of, and you don't even have to work in like a realistic style. I just feel like learning these skills tends to empower you creatively, whatever kind of work you want to make. Like I sometimes, you know, like really good cell shading or like stylized shading. Mm-hmm. If you really want to do that well, it would help so much to have a strong ability to render things realistically and really understand how light falls across form. Because in picking those little stylized shapes, you're going to make more interesting decisions. And so it's like, even to work in styles that are quite far from realism, I think all of these skills give you like a good base vocabulary. And then we can focus on the actual fun stuff, you know, which is like why any of us want to make art in the first place, you know, which is not just sort of not technical masturbation for the painters, you know, but it's to actually say something that speaks about whatever this thing is that we're in the middle of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it accentuates the illusion also, you know, like art is this kind of, it's like a magic trick almost to create this illusion for people. And the more fidelity that illusion has. What were you saying?
People would say my eyebrow game is strong, and it is.
Yeah, man.
Put some respect. I feed them every day. I could grow like a full monobrow, but I always keep it like semi-tamed. But weirdly, my girlfriend likes it. So anyway, that's not relevant. I didn't mean to interrupt. But the chat is.
Yeah, the chat is funny. Do you use the unibrow hairs as paintbrushes ever, or as drawing implements?
Yeah, hell yeah. I pluck them slowly. I could make myself some eyebrow brushes like every day because there's so many hairs. If I just grab, you pull literal fistfuls, well, not fistfuls, fingerfuls of hair out. To the extent that I always wonder if my eyebrows are balding, but there's a strong turnover rate for these eyebrows.
Speaking of technique, wouldn't it be amazing if that took your art to like a whole nother level? And it was like your secret. You're like you would never believe the secret to
Yeah.
make these
How do you get
masterpieces.
the edges? The eyebrow hair brush. Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean,
all
it
I
could
was,
be like it's so funny, like natural hair brushes, like Hans, the guy who one of the founders of the atelier I studied at, he was telling us, how specific, like the best hog bristles come from like the chunking pigs. There's like a
yeah,
specific breed of pig so it could be that this is the untapped thing that will take art to the next level would be just my eyebrow game.
stranger
I
things
was
have
going to say
happened.
art was a magic trick. I think about that a lot I think any form of artistic expression from it's broadly part of this game of playing with attention, right? Like if we're
Mhm.
painters, we're playing with visual sense. But I tend to think if you want to just take a really broad look at what it is we're doing, it's the medium is someone else's present moment, and it's just what we're gonna conjure up into that. Whether you're a musician or a chef or a dancer or whatever, it's this kind of game of playing with the aesthetics of consciousness, of experience, and very much so in the way that a magic trick is about. They're not truly performing any feat of magic, but the trick is all in your perception of what just happened, right? They're creating the experience of something that blows your mind or whatever. And I think there's something very similar to making paintings that you and learning the fundamental skills is it's learning your sleight of hand. It's learning all the different kinds of stage magic that goes into a painting, because this just is hairy sticks and greasy dirt, or it's dust on paper. And any feeling that you conjure up in someone else, if you get them to examine something in themselves, that it's kind of amazing to me that you can lay dust on paper in a way that will make someone cry, and that never stops being mind blowing to me. How you're loading this object with intention and meaning, and it is a big kind of magic trick, if you ask me.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of like the best artwork is the one that arrests somebody's attention more fully into the present moment. Like a really transcendent work of art or music kind of makes time disappear in the moment that the
Yeah,
person is experiencing it.
yeah, that's what I'm always looking for. Like one thing I'm always trying to push myself to not like. I sometimes think of mediocrity as like the enemy when I'm making work. Like good enough is not good enough. Like somehow you have to try and make something that like commands the attention, because people don't owe us anything. It's like I never want to approach the audience in the sense of like, um, I really just need you to like me because I tried really hard on this one. It's like it's not comfortable in any kind of relationship, right? It's more like somehow as artists we have to like take on the burden of being able to make it undeniable somehow, and it is what makes it so difficult to do as a living, because you can be a sort of good most things and make a good living, and it's a pretty harsh career in a sense, because yeah, good isn't good enough really to sort of make it your full-time job. Now how I feel about it personally and emotionally for the people around me who make artwork, I'm actually pretty much love everything people make. I love seeing what people make, and I don't feel so I love just to know that anyone is like enjoying creating something. But if someone asks like, um, how do I do this as a job, then my demeanor changes a bit, because at this point, um, I just know that the people who really helped me get somewhere with this weren't afraid to make it sound like it isn't going to be easy, and you're like really taking on a lot to do it as a yeah, it's like different. It's Do you get what I'm trying to say? That distinction. Like, I love seeing
Absolutely,
whatever
yeah.
anyone makes. If someone just loves to paint and they just want to do this and they don't care if it ever pays the bills, then I think it's beautiful. Like, in the same way anyone can play a bit of guitar, and I wish more people would just draw for fun. But I do feel like you need to prepare people for like, I mean, there's a lot of like discipline involved in just becoming a painter if you want it to be your job. It's going to require like way more hours than is reasonable to get the skill and practice in. And yeah, and not just any practice, but really trying to think about specific targeted practice and, trying to work smarter instead of just harder. And God, it's it's a lot,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's a different kind of conversation with people who are either professional or aspiring professional artists versus those that are just engaging it with art as a kind of personal practice or whatever, which I think is really great too. I think there's a lot of people that can get a lot of benefit from just engaging with painting as a kind of meditation or as a kind of just to engage with their creativity or to have like an interesting hobby, but like in certain workshops that I've been in, the workshops are kind of split between people that are really serious and those that are more um, inclined to make art just as a hobby. And the ones that are more inclined to just make art as a hobby usually are quite sensitive and not really open to critique, which, as you know, from being in art school, is one of the most important parts of being able to grow and develop as an artist. So I think that, it is important to be open to critique and those kinds of things, because it is it is hard to become a really great artist. It demands like a lifetime of devotion and participation, you know?
Yeah. And there's the narcissism of obviously just wanting everyone to see your work all the time, which is my flavor of narcissism I need to work on. But there's also the narcissism of not, like, I think it's a subtle form of vanity to be super afraid of being critiqued, because it shows you're really taking it personally as like an affront on your own pride. And I feel really lucky that that was one of the things that like you and me would have got hammered into you early, is that I think once you just kind of bite the bullet, and you have to seek out advice from people who are like qualified to give it, because I think you can be pretty fragile beginning as an artist, and you don't want to have someone. I have way too many friends who've had like more established painters tell them, oh yeah, you're never gonna get into galleries with this type of work, it's too fancy, it's too whatever. And like it was just bad advice, so it's hard to find that balance between who you can trust to sort of critique your work. And I think without forums now, probably the best bet is to have like a Discord group, or to join like some sort of community that you find inspiring or whatever. But yeah, vanity was a harsh word. I maybe talk about myself a bit harshly, but there is pride in but there's a right way to critique too. Like I feel like there's something about a good critique, which is even if someone says something about your work, really they're paying a kind of close attention that can be quite rare, and really doing an act of love towards you, like to actually care enough to get engaged, to look closely, to really try to figure out how it could be better, to try to offer advice for what you should do. So it's kind of like the right kind of critique, I think, is much more loving than just a kind of like, wow, good job, which is kind of a way of saying like, it's just like a positive signal, you're being friendly, but it often doesn't feel like anyone's really engaging with it either. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like having really pay close attention, and yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really valuable. It's been really valuable to me, and yeah.
Yeah, it's realizing also that, I mean, artists are usually quite busy, and if somebody's going to take that time to really engage with you and your work and to offer critique, then they're doing that in service of you and out of care for you to be able to succeed and to develop. And that was something I remember having, some cases of when I was a bit younger and starting out, where I got a little bit like upset or defensive or something like that based on certain, critiques that artists I looked up to gave to me. But yet when I expressed that to other friends who were artists, they were like, yeah, but don't you see they took the time to, give you this advice? And it's only later that I've realized the value in that, and that I was really blessed that, people were going out of their way to critique my work, even if I wasn't able to hear it at the time.
Yeah. No, it is hard. I mean, it's because we really care, and we're investing time and effort and energy, and I think most people are their own, worst critic or whatever. And like, I still find it, like emotionally painful if I get really excited that a piece is gonna work out and it just doesn't, like, which just still happens sometimes where but I've often found with that experience now, if I got really excited in the beginning and it just kind of didn't go anywhere, those are the ones I like to come back to in like 6 months' time, because often you'll find that you just needed some distance to figure out how to fix it, or if you've sort of been working and evolving, you can see it through a new pair of eyes. But yeah, I think half of the skill of like doing this is just being able to you get frustrated in trying hard, you fail a bunch, it's very disappointing, and then you show up again the next day. And that's really like the thing. Just like consistency over time is so much more powerful than anything. Like it's one of those cheesy phrases, but people like overestimate what they'll do in a day and underestimate what they'll do in a year. I often, when artists want to do this as a living, I think it's instead of focusing on your longer term goals as an artist, because the goals tend to be quite transitory, and when you achieve them, there's often a feeling of like, oh, okay, well, I'm still me. I tend to really think it's more about building a positive habit around making art. If you want to be an artist, you have to be an artist, which means developing this habit of consistently most days putting the work in. And if you're just getting started out or you have trouble with that, I think it would be a much better goal to sit down and draw for 20 minutes every day for the next 2 weeks and really stick to it. And once something becomes a habit, building on a habit is much easier than just trying to immediately be there. So often if you struggle with what to draw, just tell yourself you're going to do like one simple life study every day for a couple of weeks, and like don't even put too much thought into the subject matter. If there's some clothes piled up in a chair over there, just draw like the drapery folds, draw like a cup on your table, do a quick self-portrait, and don't even worry if you're doing it right, if you're doing the best practice, if you're using the right materials, and just build this as like a daily habit. And then once it becomes a thing that is just part of what you do, you start to read more and you start to think about what would be a better study, how to like perfect, your practice. But I think just really getting it to become, I used to feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I think you become comfortable sort of taking on the role of an artist as your identity when you really know that you are living it and doing it, and it doesn't feel weird to say it, you know what I mean? And I think like habit building is really that was the powerful thing for me about having a sketchbook on conceptart.org when we had these forum threads, because just posting a few times a week was like keeping an art diary. Mm-hmm. And one of the experiences I used to love having was like scrolling back 20 pages and seeing what I was drawing like a year ago. And I sometimes think like a lot of people are too worried about sort of being there and having a gallery and having everyone looking at your work and stuff. And I feel like just starting like a little Tumblr or a blog that you don't even share with anyone, where you just post all your studies 3 or 4 times a week, just compile all the sketches you're doing. You get the sort of gamification of building up this document. It's getting longer every day. You're watching this kind of like amount of work you've made, so you have this thing to fall back on when you feel a bit insecure. You can say, look at everything I did over the last year, and you can skip back and see the progress.
And like maybe don't even worry about if anyone else is even seeing it in the beginning, but just building like an online art diary. And then eventually you can like share it with some trusted friends, see if you can build like I think it's very hard to reach out to people who are like already established working artists because like I basically only talk to my few best friends that I've had as online friends or in real life friends for like 10 years now, and we've all known each other since none of us could draw, and it puts you on a very like equal easy footing to have like a long-term relationship. And I think the best bet for like the people who are going to hook you up with a gallery, hook you up with a company down the line, or if you can find a small circle of people just as committed to doing this as you are and just all cheer each other on, 10 years from now those will be your friends who like you can hook each other up with contacts and information, because again it's very hard to form legitimate collections with people like that otherwise. And yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I got lost in that. Talking about
yeah, I mean, you and I both come out of that conceptart.org era that was so great for both of our developments. And I think that there is something there's a void that's been left by that kind of community dissolving, because yeah, what you're saying about having the sketchbooks, it is great to be able to track your own progress, to be able to look back on prior work. And there was also the accountability of people encouraging you to post regularly and to continue to produce and to continue to grow and to be critiqued. And yeah, I don't know of anything like that now. Do you know of anything that still exists?
The people from Massive Black are trying to relaunch the forum. Carl Dobsky talked about it, but it's somehow it's not just concept art, but I think the internet almost sort of moved on generally from forums in terms of traffic. Right. It's so hard to remember how much of our teenage years there wasn't an obvious website that was like we all play social media like it's our lottery ticket to escape a normal life, which I say completely hypocritically as someone who's kind of been on the winning end of that.
Yeah.
For me. But the thing is, like, if I had had the platform I had now 10 years ago, I never would have been able to get to the place where I'm doing the work I do now. And it would have just been a distraction or unhelpful or, yeah. And I think it sets up the wrong incentive. So I sort of sometimes feel like, I don't know, it's weird. There was never a sense on conceptart.org. Like maybe you thought if my work really spread around the forum, I might get a job or something. But I don't think anyone thought like you could become like internet famous on a forum. It was much more like wanting to become a well-established member of a community. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think the closest thing I can see to it is because I've been added to a couple of these like art groups on Discord or Telegram, where like 100 people or less will have like a shared chat room somewhere, and maybe that can emulate the experience somewhat. But I have no doubt like that people will find a way. I don't want to be already becoming the old man complaining about how the internet was back in my day. Like I guess I feel like we'll figure it out, but yeah.
I'm curious, how much of your work that you create do you not show to any audience, or do you still work on pieces that are just for you or just for, you know, your private sketchbooks or anything like that?
Nothing finished. Every now and then I do like little life. Yeah, a lot of my sketchbook stuff I don't share anywhere. I do a lot of like little 5-10 minute sketches of friends when they're hanging around, or like a lot of this sketchbooks. And I have like pages of study books. Like right now I'm like filling up an anatomy book and like a perspective thing, and none of that really seems, but I haven't like made like a finished piece. Yeah, I always think about like someone like Andrew Wyeth, like making like all of his best life's work for 20 years before sharing it. And
yeah, I think that's really common. I think that used to be quite common.
Yeah, that's where I feel like the little rat in a cage, you know. I'm like, so I can't imagine holding on to something like that, you know. It's inspiring, you know. I'm often I don't know, when I'm hard on myself, I sometimes feel like I've been like reposting a lot of work recently, and I know on one level, like because my account's like growing, it will reach some amount of people who haven't seen it, and I like that. But on another level, as I'm doing it, I feel like I'm stuck in this addictive cycle. Like, what do I need people to like congratulate me for the third time on having drawn this? And I always get torn because like if you write a song, people will listen to a song like 100 times. You know, like on one level, I know like I put like sometimes 50 or 100 hours into this. I can't really feel too bad about like wanting more than a fleeting second of people. But emotionally, it sometimes feels like yeah, it gets in the way of like the work I need to be doing, which is just making new stuff. And suddenly I'm getting this feeling of like all this attention on something I did 3 years ago. And yeah, again, there's probably nothing more boring than watching me like whine about like problems I have with Instagram. But if I'm just being transparent, maybe it's interesting. I don't
I
know.
think it's
You
interesting.
know, like sometimes I just repost something because I'm just like feeling an old piece. I'll be like in a mood and I'll see some work of mine and I'll be like, oh yeah, that one again, you know, and it is pretty fun just putting it out. So I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that the best moments I've had when it's related to my art have been in the process of making art. You know, the flow state that you get into when you're actually making art, and whatever kind of, like, I've never had an experience of posting a work of art on social media and no matter how many likes or whatever I receive, that experience is very empty compared to the actual experience of being in that creative flow state and watching this thing unfold before your eyes. And I think that that's really important to remember and to not get too caught in this whole kind of game of trying to, make something to be liked or whatever, that the value of the creative process is in the creative process itself, you know?
And it's like a very altered or interesting state is you think you remember what it's like when you're not in it. And then when you're back, you always realize there was something you had forgotten just how interesting it was. Like I feel that way every time I get really focused and into a work of art. There's such a feeling of like being where I'm supposed to be. Like when the thing that really drives me forward is when I'm making a piece that I know like says something I want or is just feels like I'm onto something good or I'm enjoying it. There's such the thing that I crave more than anything is that sense of that I'm where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to be. Which maybe that's like an illusion I let myself engage in voluntarily, but I find that I gain a lot of meaning in my life from deciding that this thing is meaningful. Giving it that meaning personally, and then just rolling with it. Like I know in the back of my mind, I'm aware that one day the sun will swell up and swallow the planet Earth, and there will be no. Like I know that I always tell people that in some sense this is a slow motion version of building sandcastles. If you build a sandcastle, the tide's going to wash it away. It doesn't matter if you're Rembrandt. It doesn't matter who you are. It's slowed down in how long. There's a technique and an art form to making these works that can hang around in reality a bit longer, but they will be washed away, destroyed eventually. And so I think sometimes. Yeah, it's that weird thing of like part of me knows it's absurd and knows it's not meaningful, but at the same time, when I get into making artwork, I try to take it seriously as if it is truly meaningful for me, and then I get to have that kind of experience, which I think is just something that's really nice. If that's a way to, I feel like that probably is what meaning is it's like. It's something that you get to imbue into things more than something objectively there. But I often think of making art as meaningful in the same way having a good conversation is. Like if you're trying to talk to someone and you just are stuck in the back of your head thinking, we're both going to die one day, it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter if I make them feel better. If I make them laugh now, they'll stop laughing later. It's like you just enjoy the act of connecting. and that's what I'm trying to get out of making artwork. Is this is a form of communication and connection to have. And like when someone sees a piece and like if you manage to slow down and look at it and really feel something, then that's exactly what I intended for it to do. Like I really, more than anything, the thing that I find meaningful is knowing that this can, like, it still trips me out that other people see my work on some level, and that and that like it's just weird. I enjoy it. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, it's kind of intimate in a way, because you're
It is, yeah.
pouring
It's
out your
intimate.
innermost feelings onto this thing that other people are experiencing.
Yeah, it's weird when you see a painter who's been dead for 400 years and you look at their work and you feel something that they felt. I never stop finding that moving. When I every now and then I'll be quiet in the museum and I'll see some passage painted beautifully, and I can just feel that a living, breathing human being with their own dreams and eyes gazing upon this world, and just sometimes just in like the way a tree is painted beautifully, knowing that someone 600 years ago found a tree beautiful is just, it never stops blowing my mind how lovely that is. It's so good.
Yeah, I think of works of art as these like psychic crystals, so it's like you're looking at this psychic time capsule in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, that goes to an interesting. I often think about like how much of your intention can go up. Like one of the things I think about the most is I heard an author talking about this, that the book you think you're writing often isn't the book the reader reads. It's in some point in creating a thing, you have to surrender that. I think for a piece of work to really feel alive or interesting, there has to be room for the viewer to participate with their own ideas and feelings and reactions. And there's often something I think about when I'm designing compositions is I kind of gave up a long time ago on trying to have one specific intent that I want the reader to have, because it seems like, one, it will limit how powerful they can be, and it's also just going to be a source of frustration. And I often think much more about trying to create something that's like fertile to have meaning projected onto it. Like some of my favorite compositions have been about trying to come up with like a symbolic motif that could mean maybe even two completely opposite things. Like I have this drawing like Shelter, where it's the male figure hugging the female figure like into his form. And like I've had one person look at that and say, this is my husband holding me when I feel scared of the world, and the thorns around show that he's like, giving us shelter. And then other people like, no, this is an abusive relationship. He's a void on the inside, and he's trying to fill his own void with her, and everything else is ominous foreshadowing. And I love that actually, in that case, the intention was to have two directly opposite meanings. And when I saw people getting both, that was one of those things where I was like, nice. Like, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. I sometimes, the whole goal in getting good at technique is to start trying to play games like that as an artist, where you stop thinking about like, can I pull off the anatomy? Can I pull off the rendering? And you start thinking about, how am I playing with attention? What am I doing here? And that's the kind of like free place you want to get to, where it's where you can really try to conceptually imagine what this piece is about and what you want to do with it, and then the technique is just the vehicle. And yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Rorschach test, and I forget where I read this. It was in some sort of like self-development creativity book, but they were talking about how like it's like you are the only person that sees your work of art, and everybody else, they see basically their version of it. They see their work of art, which is like their meaning and perception imposed upon what you create.
Yeah.
And you can't control that, so in a way that's liberating, because if somebody doesn't like it, then they're not liking their own image. they're not liking their own perceptions. It has nothing to do with what you created. It's kind of
Yeah.
empty in a way, and then people bring their own meaning to it.
Yeah. And then the goal is just playing with this whole situation. This whole situation between your mind, the art object, and the mind of anyone else who will come into contact with it, and it's all in context to the world and reality, and so it's much less solid ground than maybe it feels like sometimes, of like, I make this painting and I put my emotions into it, because the meaning of artwork changes broadly over time as the expected symbols a culture knows how to read change, as the context of the society it's in changes, like a million different things. I wonder how many paintings that hang in museums obviously made sense in a way that is like lost on most people who aren't educated now. Like a huge amount of them, if it's like Greek mythology, it used to be like, if you were painting for the aristocracy, you felt like all of them, this was their shared mythological language, and this was basically like making a painting with the Avengers or some shit. Like everyone was like, I know Iron Man.
Right.
And like now, it's different through our eyes if you don't have that kind of. So I often like to play this weird game of what kind of concepts are universally meaningful, regardless of the clothing they're wearing. And I mean, that's why all my stuff ends up being existential things about impermanence or the kind of strangeness of being at all. Because like I know that
I
I mean, like I expose.
I hate to interrupt you, but it says that we have like 50 seconds left. If you want, we can jump on another live, because there's like an hour cap of these live videos, and talk a little bit more.
I'm happy to keep going.
Yeah, and this is an interesting point. I definitely want you to continue. So yeah, I'll just end this and then go back on in a sec. See you soon.
Yeah. All right. I need like 2 minutes, so I'll see you soon.
Okay, intermission.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cool, man.
Oh, wrong way.
Welcome back.
This is my chair. What's
Nice.
up?
Pretty good chair.
A bunch of people coming in fresh, so we should reset the context. What were we talking about? I was talking about
yeah, you were talking about works of art losing their meaning over time because people not being able to get the references that would have been just obvious to people in previous cultures.
Yeah, and sometimes I would say, okay, so one of the things I like to try and do is think about underneath the very, I want to get these, which one is perennial and parochial? Which one means like current and which one is like timeless? Perennial is like timeless.
Yeah.
Yes. Underneath, like obviously a lot of my work is like referenced or on me or my girlfriend. All the people kind of look pretty similar. There's a lot of repetition. But I like to think that like underneath what I'm trying to do is think about concepts that are universal and maybe not even to just human beings, but like, I think the reason impermanence is such a powerful idea in artwork, it's the essence of any heartbreak song, any song about death or nostalgia or the passing of time, of aging, is I feel like just within the laws of physics, any being in this universe will understand the specific pain of impermanence. And I think it's what makes it so potent in artwork is that it kind of, often even in mythology, if we can't understand the specific detail of stories, it's these kind of underlying universal ideas about, that really communicate the power over time. So I'm often trying to think about like, and also just like trying to be honest in artwork. Like I sometimes feel like I can't, if you want to, like if I really want to go there with a piece, I often feel the sense that that I need to have authentically been there in my own mind, like not necessarily experienced something, but to have. Yeah, often I feel like, you can't go wrong with just being honest about your situation. Like I come back to, like a lot of people think they don't have anything interesting to make artwork about. But you know that album, Fear of a Blank Planet, the
Oh
Porcupine
yeah,
Tree album? And that's
yeah.
essentially that album I related so much as a kid because he's
It's
like
one of
an
my
English
favorite albums too.
artist. Yeah, he's from a town very similar to where I'm from, and it's just about this specific feeling of like disconnection. It's the kind of things that people don't think of as an artistic motif. It's
Right.
about being a bored, spoiled kid who doesn't feel anything anymore, wandering around the
Mhm.
mall stoned and playing Xbox all the time. And they're the kind of things that people don't, you know, the thing about like making artwork is it's probably the things about yourself that you don't think are interesting that would be super interesting because no one is normal. Or especially with time as well. Like it's like you can't go wrong with just kind of expressing what you've experienced and what you know. Um,
Yeah, and it's
yeah.
also we are more common than we like to think. So by expressing something that, like that Fear of a Blank Planet album, which is expressing something kind of mundane, there are so many people that have that experience, and by him glorifying it in a way by creating something beautiful out
Yeah.
of it, then people can
Yeah.
kind of commune with each other who are all feeling that way. It's interesting. There's
Yeah,
something
that's
to
exactly
there's
turning up
something
mundanity until it's awe-inspiring. Like
yeah.
how could it be this mundane? It's like the Alan Watts quote. I forget one where he says, it blows his mind more that the universe can ever appear boring. Like,
Yeah.
you're in the middle of this infinite mystery on a thin skin of atmosphere on a planet exploding, whatever the story is of what the world is, it's bizarre. And the fact that you can ever just feel like you're in a nothing town where nothing ever happens and we're just normal people and this is just everyday life, like in a way that is in and of itself an awe-inspiring act of illusion to get so lost and disconnected in whatever this thing is that it ever feels normal. And that album represented to me like taking that feeling and really transforming it into a powerful artistic statement. And I often think that that is the sort of alchemy of making art is transforming anything into I want to say pain, but it's too cliche. But that's often where I like to go. But it's sort of like I don't know. Somehow, like there's something so cute about. We were talking the other day, me and my girlfriend, about realistic painting. Like people see apples all the time and don't find them interesting, and then someone paints an apple, and the very act of turning it into an art object, you're like, wow, they do look like that. And suddenly, like I think it's this taking pieces of reality and remixing them and curating them and creating an object that we can all like share. We can place our attention on it and talk about it and share an experience. And that feels like the sort of ultimate game of art to me is just, yeah, like I said, it's just conversational. It's this act of creating a shared center of attention to connect over.
Mm.
And
Yes. Something I was interested to ask you about is, do you find that the ideas within your work and the themes and the symbols kind of develop spontaneously when you're sketching? Do you kind of go into a sort of like trance, and then somewhere down the line, a few hours into drawing, you realize what you're working with and you can start to narrativize that? Or do you usually have a very specific kind of idea and narrative in your head before you even begin the process of creating something?
much closer to the first one. I feel perpetually like I've had my last idea and that I'll never do anything good again. Like I constantly feel that yeah that I've lost it or that I'm that nothing's there. But I sort of sit down and I go through the motions of, okay, well, if I was going to thumbnail some ideas, what would I do? I guess I would sit in front of a piece of paper and I would draw something. And I basically kind of just, um, I kind of just scribble stuff around. I draw things, I draw little figures and mess with them. And often when I thumbnail, they're really like not good drawings. I'm just approximations of people and trying angles and following things that feel intuitively interesting. And then most of the time, um, I'm never looking to just make something that's like, oh, that's just weird or just unexpected. Like somehow it has to have a sense of carrying like it's the more unexpected an idea is, but the more it somehow feels like it communicates something. That's what I'm drawn towards. But yeah, I don't sit down and have I don't instantly know what it is something is expressing. I'll just feel an intuitive sense of like, okay, this one has something to it. And then it's a process of slowly developing, and very often the meaning evolves as I finish it. And then in hindsight, it's always super obvious why something came out at the time it did.
Mm.
But I always tell people, like, if you're working in a sort of intuition-based approach like that, your brain isn't capable of just making a random choice. Like, if there's one thing on a page that stands out to you and you can't consciously explain why, it must represent something about your internal state that it stands out to you. You know, something about it is speaking to you, and you don't have to know why to move forwards with it. So it's very much driven by a feeling of like a strong compulsion that I should work on this one, and I often don't know why until it's done. Yeah. And then in the execution of it, I'm constantly just looking to try to push like the uh, it's all about just getting people to notice it in a way. Like in some sense, all of the technical stuff is about making it something that's easy to pay attention to in a way, or that grabs attention. And it's like I want something that, like, a lot of the music I like is a big blend of really strange ideas, but with quite surprisingly pop aesthetics underneath it. You know, I like artists like Aphex Twin sometimes because it's very weird and very out there, but it's also immediately interesting. And and I don't know, maybe that's like a slight shallowness thing in my work, but I often like dream of making work that is like, I think it represents what I grew up on, which is I didn't grow up on classical art and listening to classical music. I grew up on classical music. I grew up on pop culture and pop music and metal music and shit. And like um that's just kind of the aesthetic that I'm drawn to making. You know, I guess I don't like making people have to try too hard to convince themselves that the stuff I'm making is interesting. Like I view that as my responsibility to, um, yeah. Sometimes the surface isn't just the surface to me. Like it's like sometimes I listen to just pop music because I'm like blown away by the highly engineered, hypnotic quality to it. There's something amazing about how they make like an Ariana Grande song sound that is just so listenable. And at the same time, I like listening to really obscure, weird music that you kind of have to work to get and is often more rewarding. And I guess I'm trying to look for like the middle way. You know, it's like I want to be able to command attention, but then actually do something interesting with it. You don't want
Mm.
people to just notice and then like forget about it the next second either. So it's sort of like a weird balancing act, you know. But yeah, I like surface because I don't
Yeah.
think anything is truly shallow. You know, it's all reality. You know, that's a distinction we draw in our head between what's deep, bro, and what's not. And in some sense, it's all magic to me. You know,
Mm.
just different flavors.
Yeah, that's something I really love and appreciate about your work is that you have that classical training and aesthetic, but it's very modern and surrealistic, and you work with a lot of narrative and symbolism as well. I mean, you and I both spent time in the atelier system, you longer than I have, but I found a lot of people in the atelier system that were it's like their peak is the perfect cast painting or something like that. You know, like a lot of people that I met that were phenomenal painters, they never took any of that skill and applied it to creating their own expression. So I think
Yeah,
that it does take a meeting of both understanding how to create these surfaces like you're talking about and to create something that has that depth and illusion to it and that refinement, but also communicate something because art
yeah.
is communication, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just in me. Like so many of my favorite, like I'm mostly just like influenced by music much more than painters, and most of my favorite, a lot of my favorite musicians are like real technicians, but a lot of them aren't. You know, I always grew up loving like anything from Nirvana, Daniel Johnston. Like I like a lo-fi sound. So sometimes I think there's something really powerful about showing you that just in the end, we only have so much time to be alive, and there's an immediacy to pop music that sort of treats you as if it's like wanting to feel good now, to communicate something. There's an impatience in me that wants that kind of pretty surface and satisfying visual impact, and then something that like sticks in your head that you remember it at the end of the day. Um, and it's always like hard to balance the two things. So, but yeah, no, I had that experience when you're in the atelier system. It's very easy to get put on a new set of rails. That's like we used to as a kid. You're going through school. There's the next exam. There's the next thing, and you're on the rails. And then if you go into art or just at various points in their life, everyone has this weird moment where suddenly no one is telling you what to do anymore, and you're just kind of existing now until you don't. And that is always, I think, a very like whenever it happens for people, it's a very like unsettling period for a while. And I think sort of getting into the atelier system can be a bit like getting on this new set of rails again. There's a new, very clearly defined end goal, which is getting more like better and better technically, and you start gaining a lot of self-esteem and genuine beautiful experiences from studying life closely. And it can be hard to sort of get out of that again. Do you know what I mean? Like, especially if you become incredibly competent at painting from life, but you've never really worked on your compositional skills or drawing from imagination or combining the two. um, it can just feel really painful to do something where you feel like you're a beginner again, and it never feels like the right time. So it's like, oh, friends around you will think you're drawing as good as anyone draws, because if you're not in that world, you can't tell the difference. But it always felt like it went so deep. You would see some painters and you were just like, oh my god, like I'm nothing next to that. And
Mm.
um, so I always just like tried to keep up a practice of my own stuff in my spare time, even when I was studying there, because I didn't want to lose sight of why I got into making art in the first place. And
Right.
also classically, like if you graduated an atelier, it was like, congrats, you're a beginner now. You can paint something and make it look realistic, but now you've got to. I mean, I think to old master paintings, that was truly like, okay, you can write in good sentences. Now, are you going to write a novel? Are you going to be a journalist? Are you going, et cetera,
Wow.
et cetera? Like, there's something about visual art training is basically so, from a fundamental perspective, so poor everywhere in society that um, I think we put it on a. I mean, it is really hard. I'm not trying to put it down, but we put on a pedestal being able to just paint realistically from life, which probably used to, yeah, it probably used to be like you're an intermediate now. You can paint very well, but what are you going to paint? And that question is very overwhelming and easy to never want to truly face. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
I hope that doesn't sound too harsh or whatever. It's like,
No, I think it's fascinating. Yeah, I think it comes down to intention also because you can have the intention to create art and it's just for the purpose of exploring that technical pursuit, or even to just create something that has market value or something like that, which you can, I mean, some people just love painting from life, and that's a beautiful thing. Like some people just want to paint still lives, and that's great. But for other people, it's an expression. They're trying to communicate something, you know, and that can
Yeah.
be, they're trying to communicate like an inner experience that they've had, or a vision that they've had, or some kind of emotion that they've felt, you know. And that was always my orientation with art. It's like I remember some of the earliest memories I had. It was kind of like this like primal emotional type expression, and that was like before I started getting into how to actually do the technical stuff. So
Yeah.
that's carried through, has been one of the main motivators and intentions behind creating art, is still wanting to express something that's like a from a more internal space. And I think you have that in your work as well, you know. But I mean, it's like
I you know that still life and life painting can be that too. Like it can be the sort of
right.
beatific vision upon reality. Like it can, like I think some people who get really into it have a sense of such a, the closer you pay attention to life, the more you realize you're not seeing, you know, you're seeing but you're not seeing 90% of the time. And I feel like the idealized version of like a straight realist is chasing this state of really aligning your attention with the world and expressing that for everyone else to see.
Mm.
But I mean, it's, I think the fun thing about creating art now in this moment in time is that you can combine picking from that rich history of art knowledge and then just the culture that, like, you read the way people like contemporaries to Klimt would critique him, and they're so, it's such a, like, I was just reading this, I got this amazing art book on Dore, and you just
Mm.
read these like scathing, like there was one thing that was like the biggest problem with Dore is he's got too big of an imagination and he's always trying to use it. They were critiquing him because it was much more of a thing that if you were a painter, you visited the classic biblical and mythological motifs and you painted your version. And they were literally critiquing him, saying like his imagination is getting in the way of him being a painter. And you
Oh
just
wow.
think like the training and skill was high, but I imagine it was just a culture that was so stuffy and conservative and like would really like, you know, we would hate to be in it now. So I think this is like in some ways the most, probably the most interesting time to be a painter, I hope. I think it's a bit harder to get that level of excellence in your training, but there's so much more. Um, I do think, especially like online social media has created this new, um, you know, you're not shut out in the same way if you don't fit the kind of gallery mainstream narrative. Does that make sense? Like, because some of the teachers who are like 20 years older than me still have this kind of chip on their shoulder from the days when galleries wouldn't show realist work because it's not in anymore, and that turns people into that kind of like, oh, all modern art is bullshit mindset. Because I think, you know, you get this kind of complex from it. And I like never experienced anyone telling me off for like um, making real. You know, I just didn't have that experience growing up, and I've generally found that like you can sort of do what you want nowadays.
Yeah, we
I
live in
guess I'm not pushing any boundaries.
yeah, we live in probably the craziest time for art ever, where you can basically do literally whatever you want, you know. And
Yeah,
I mean, there's people that are painting little egg tempera paintings, like they're pre-Renaissance painters or something, and making a living doing that. Or you could
yeah,
just go crazy abstract, like very far out contemporary, and there's a market for that too. And I think that social media has really, it's taken over the role of selling from galleries to an extent where a lot of artists now just find this kind of niche through social media, and they can find their own audience and market where they can just sell their work through that, and they're not dependent on some gallery that is going to tell them what they can or can't create, or what is going to sell, or what isn't. And that's really empowering.
yeah. Yeah, if you want to see, if you want to see like an acid trip from old Flemish still life painters, you have to look at, you know, Christian Rex van Minnen.
Oh yeah.
Do you know him?
Yeah.
I mean, like a painter like that could only exist today. Like
Yeah.
someone who claimed during alcoholic years in his life he self-taught painting from books at a local library. I mean, like he truly didn't. He says he didn't go to any kind of formal art training. Like I've seen his paintings in person, and they have this kind of flawless
Yeah.
quality to them. And I think he just actually read old books on oil painting technique closely and applied them, and just actually read it.
Yeah.
He goes by Van Minnen on Instagram. But it's just this mixture of like, um, I mean, it's just you just got to look at it. It's hard to even describe. Like,
Tattooed jelly
gummy
bean.
worms and organ meat with chakras and floating broken mirrors reflecting playing cards with drops of water condensed with messages scribbled out and tattooed and scratched flesh with comments written from Instagram lives that he adds onto his painting. I mean, it's just truly like indescribable.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, someone just said in the comments, like, I know that you can still work online, but I still want to do gallery stuff just because I think I think it would be sad if cities didn't have openings anymore. It's just if there would like I truly do it for the sort of ceremony of having a show, and in some sense, you can't really see a work of art if you don't see it in person. There is always
Yeah.
something lost. Whether it's just the quality of the image or just the feeling of being in front of the actual objects that someone, if I was going to be all cheesy, I think there's something really to that. There's something about knowing this is the thing, this is the actual thing, that they worked on, and maybe I'm just being romantic about it, but I like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that there's a little bit of the intention and the energy of the artist that gets encapsulated within the actual art object after it's been created. And yeah, definitely you can never replace actually seeing the real life original work of art, especially because nowadays most people see like a 1-inch image on a screen, and that's their experience of art. you know
Yeah, no, yeah, it's not the same. Um, my mind pulled a blank. We've been talking for a while, but I'm happy to keep going. I just need a second. You got to prompt me.
Cool.
Can we
Yeah.
see a shot of the artwork you have behind you? That's the Black Madonna, right?
Yeah, this is the
Is that
Black
what?
Madonna.
Beautiful, man. Really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. This one was originally designed digitally, but it was created with acrylic and gold leaf. I was on a gold leaf trip for a while last year, which is fun, but
Yeah. Is
yeah.
that an original or a print? I forget. That one was
That
digital.
one's this is an original. It was originally designed digitally. I've kind of had this process where I've been taking digital works and then using that as the basis for a painting. So this one's acrylic. And yeah,
Wow.
working mostly in acrylic nowadays. I haven't worked with oils now for a couple years. It's funny, I stopped working in oil when I started traveling, and I started working with acrylic just because it was a lot more portable, and because I was traveling really constantly, so I could only work for like a couple days in a place and then have to roll it up and then move on with it. But I used to hate acrylics, but I've kind of figured out how to work with them in a way to where I like it now. But I
Yeah.
bet it's been probably like 3 or 4 years since I've touched oil paint, and I bet when I get back to it, like when I feel grounded enough to dive back into it, I'll be like, oh man, there's nothing like oil paint. I miss the smell sometimes. Like I wish they could make acrylics kind of smell like oils or something, just for the experience.
Poison. Yeah, he's all the. Yeah, if I dropped it young, it'll have been the paints. I don't know. I try to be careful,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, they give good smells. Oh, someone asked. There was a question about do you keep your living and creating space separately?
I do. Yeah. Do you?
Yes. Yeah, I started for a few years now, and I can't imagine. I can't imagine going back. That's exactly what I'm doing now. I've been working from home for a month. That's about. Um, I mean, I don't mind working from home, but I like having a studio better. Yeah.
I mean, my studio is like 5 meters away from my bedroom or something like that, but they are separate rooms, and I like having the separate rooms.
Yeah.
It feels like
Yeah. It's not, in,
more organized use of my energy or something like that.
yeah. I think we were talking about building habits earlier, and if you're trying to build a new habit, having it be, you want to think about setting up a space that incentivizes the habit you want to form, right? It's the same for like quitting a habit. Like if you want to quit something, you try to make it invisible, you try to make it inaccessible. And if you want to form one, you need to make it like I do small things, but like I notice, right, you can't plan for when you're at your sort of peak motivation and peak energy. You have to try and set up your life for you at your absolute slimiest, sluggiest. You know, I know that when I wake up in the morning, my will is weaker and the wrong thing, and suddenly you're just like, you know, you can procrastinate for hours. So things like having a space where your tools are nice and organized, and if there's a piece you want to work on tomorrow, just set it out, even with the pencils there. It's just like the small details that make it just more likely. You know, if you ran this multiverse 100 times, you know, statistically, what percentage of the time do you not procrastinate for 2 hours? It's going to be the setup where you've, you know, made it easier. So I do think like the small details of like how you lay out your environment you're going to work in, like, can really help for sort of and it's small things like having bad light or like having a chair that is just so uncomfortable. Like you can power through all of these, but when you can make the choices to sort of like improve those things, you should, you know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that James Jean said that he like removed all the comfy seats out of his studio so that when he would get into his studio, is like he would find that if he had a comfy couch, he would just sit in the couch and like stare at stuff. But the fact that he didn't have any comfy place to sit, he would just immediately start painting and just kind of attack it, which is like
My studio is pretty
that's
barren.
yeah, that's a more extreme way to go, but yeah, part of it. Do you want to take some questions from people?
But let's take some cues. There's a little lag, but just it's going to be impossible to answer all of them, so we'll just read random ones, I guess. Or maybe it will be. Maybe there'll be three.
So there's a couple questions that people submitted. Somebody said, if you had no one to show your art to, would you still make it? Like, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but at the same time, I realized recently I don't feel any shame in embracing the fact that I partially like making artwork to connect with other people. I I think I was watching the Miyazaki documentary on Hayao Miyazaki of Studio Ghibli fame, and he was someone who just commands a kind of respect from a craftsmanship perspective, just so productive and hardworking and interesting, and he spent a lot of time about like serving his viewer. And when I saw it in someone else, it kind of made me think that sometimes I feel like I put myself into a really um, like I put on a pedestal this idea of just expressing for just you and just yourself. And it just suddenly occurred to me, like, why is that so much better than also being motivated by like creating something in service for other people? Do you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I think I would draw myself, but at the same time, I do really enjoy. Sometimes when I'm making something, I get a lot of motivation from the idea that I'm making this for the person who like needs to see it. But on the flip side, if all you do is think about an audience, I feel like you can never make anything interesting because you don't have access to anyone else's mind in any kind of you're always working with a caricature of them that you've built. So it's this kind of weird thing where I feel like I'm often mining my own mind because I have fairly good access to that in service of other people in a weird way. Like it becomes this kind of trying to take on both things. So that would be my take on that question.
Yeah, what the question makes me think about is I remember when I was like a little kid and I first started painting, I would make like a little drawing or a little painting and I would go and like bring it into my parents' room and I would show my parents and I would get kind of like they would say, "Oh, that's great," and I would get this kind of like love from my parents after making this thing. And I think that's when I first kind of realized that I could kind of like hack the love or like affirmation game by like making works of art. And that's probably like what led me down this role of becoming an artist in the first place, was those like really early experiences. So I think that in a way my art from the very beginning has necessitated an audience, that has always played an important role in me feeling motivated to create something, because
Yeah.
even if it was just like my parents when I was a little kid, but that experience of connecting and sharing something with somebody else, I think it is important. But I would probably, I mean, what would I do totally alone if there's nobody else? I'd probably be pretty bored. So yeah, like making art would
I
be.
have this weird feeling. My imaginary audience would be whoever finds this shit in my apartment when I die or something. Like
Yeah.
in some sense, I would probably, because I'm the same way. I think in some ways we're chasing the like, you just want people to be okay with you. It's like and like in some sense, yeah, I'd probably just be like, I hope someone finds this one day.
That's a Van
There was
Gogh.
a question someone said, was I a fan of Tool before the commission? I just feel the need to be like yeah, of course. Like I never take commissions. That was the only commission I've taken in 5 years because it was such a wish fulfillment from since I was like I don't know the age, but like young teenager. Yeah, no, hell yeah.
Yeah.
It was for that reason.
Yeah,
Wait,
man.
okay,
Congratulations.
I'll pitch you one.
Yeah.
Someone said, um, oh man, okay, hold on. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a lot of like, how do you find your inspiration? That's a hard one, but why don't you give it a go?
It's such a mixed bag because sometimes these sort of expressions come through really naturally and spontaneously. Like there'll be something I just feel like I need to make, and other times it's like pulling teeth. Like I have to force myself to sit down and start creating something. And I think that I've, yeah, built the program within my own mind that I need to be constantly producing art. And I feel some sort of weird existential anxiety if I'm without an art project. It's like I always have some painting or some drawing or something that I'm working on. Like I don't remember the last time in years and years where I didn't. And so if I don't know what I'm going to create, I force myself to create something. And then the inspiration kind of starts to blossom out of that, I feel like. But sometimes the works of art are very inspired. Like they do come from a particular experience or source. But I think that there's also sometimes the more monotonous act of just sitting down and uh, trying to open myself for something to come through.
Yeah, it's discovered piece by piece. It's not like it's like anything else, like trying to be in shape or trying to be healthy. It's a fight against entropy. You never become inspired. You can only be inspired in a moment, but it never becomes a trait. Do you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
um, you can practice ways of living that are more conducive to it. I think trying to stay learning and growing in a sense, like trying to have new experiences, learn about new ideas, uh, you know, a lot of it is I spend a lot of time listening to audiobooks or podcasts or trying to listen to new music or trying to get out into nature a lot. Just the way light falls on objects is inspiring to me. Like just being outside. But yeah, it's in some sense it is the job. It's the hardest part. It's like I constantly feel the anxiety of not knowing where the next idea is going to come from. So, and that is the work is like solving it piece by piece. I only really ever have the ideas, the two or three things I'm working on at a time. I don't know how you got here, man, but you're here now, so settle down, all right?
I don't know how I got here either. Do you know? That's the fundamental
Were you, were,
mystery.
were you recommended? Yeah. When did I get here? I don't remember being born.
Yeah, it's
I
a
can't even
mystery.
think that far back in time. I have a
That's
terrible
the deepest
memory.
question that anybody's asked on this.
Yeah, I like that.
That's so
How
fun.
did I get here? That's the real question. How did any of us get here? I guess somebody, yeah, my parents must have been up to no good.
Yeah, but how did
Do
your
you ever
parents
think
get here?
just trillions of years ago if that one amphibian hadn't paused for that 1 second to look at that fly on the surface, then it's like, and every single ancestor in your family tree had to fuck at exactly the microsecond they did for that exact sperm cell. It really gets to the question of identity. Like as a kid, everyone asks that thing of like, who would I be if I was someone else? But you wouldn't be. It would be someone else. And the sheer like unlikelihood that you exist, the sheer lottery. And how is it? Like what is the thing that we're calling I in that sentence? That's the real fucking mystery, you know? You don't know how you were born, you don't know where you're going when you die, you don't even know how you're here right now, or how this little piece of the universe has now developed a sense of self that it calls I. I mean, great question. Great question there. How did any of us get here? I don't
Yeah.
fucking know. But that's the ultimate, because I grew up like edgy atheist teenager. Everything's meaningless, blah blah blah. And it's like if you
Listening to Porcupine.
want to solve the mystery of life intellectually, if you want to think it through, it's leading nowhere but nihilism. I feel because if things are only meaningful in their ends, in what they will, then time will undo all of it. And that sense of meaning for me as an adult has come from more and more discovering that it's a sort of gratitude or appreciation for the sheer mystery of being here. You know what I mean? And just instead of worrying about what it's going to be like when I'm dead, I'd worry about, well, what is it like right now? What is even going on now? What's my fucking the mystery of having an ego at all? Do you sometimes wake up and there's that half second where you're like, oh, it's still happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like this thing's, where it's all coming back online. There's almost like a mini moment where it's just like light, color. I'll see my girlfriend next to me and I'll be like, wait, oh yeah, this, and just that. If someone wants to know what my inspiration is, it's that. It's this sense that the present moment is too strange and too, like, I just feel like I have to do something with it. I have to say something. I have to make something. And that's really what, like, drives me making art. It's just like, while I'm here, while I'm alive, like, I just feel like I have to have to do something with it. And that's kind of the sort of, and it is like getting, there's the sort of come up of feeling an idea become exciting and getting engrossed in it and forgetting about, the thing that we love about making art is while the problems are hard, when I'm lost in making a piece, I'm not thinking about dying. I'm not thinking about I'm not, I've shrunk my world to this little set of problems that is solvable. And for the duration of making that painting, I get to be in this experience that's very beautiful. And I think the thing that I find quite sad sometimes is I'll get so, like getting high on anything, that moment when you realize that you've been lost in an illusion, I find kind of painful sometimes, when you just kind of realize that no painting is going to save you or save the world or whatever. But, then you just make the next one and deal with it tomorrow. Like, I don't know, it's fun. It's just fun to do.
Yeah. Yeah, the act of making art is a beautiful expression of being alive. And I think that getting a little too like righteous about it, like I'm going to make this painting to try to save the world, it can kind of take you out of just that, that Zen state of being in the flow of just making art and dancing with it and allowing that expression to arise naturally, you know. But something I'll
Yes.
say about inspiration is that for sure my state of consciousness dramatically influences the art that I'm making. And I find that when I'm in a really clear and connected state of consciousness and I feel really good within myself, creativity seems to flow really naturally. And I've been in places in my life where I'm on a really deep creative flow where things just seem to come unhindered. And then when I'm like stressed out, when I'm dealing with certain issues in my life or within myself, it's a lot more difficult to get into that creative flow. So I would really prioritize like care and maintenance of yourself as being primary to being able to show up for your creative work.
Yeah, that's like the light path. Well, then you got I mean, think about how many is the self-destructive impulse of artists just another form of like ego annihilation? Do you know what I mean? Like it's not one that I want to be on, but there's something about so thoroughly going into the darkness that you also create these cathartic moments of clarity. Like, because I feel like there's probably the same sense of um, none of this matters. I just want to make the artwork. I think you probably feel that when you've like destroyed your life to the extent that you also have these moments of clarity too. You've got to think about it's just not a price I'm willing to pay. Do you know what I mean? Or that I feel is necessary. I think do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know what you mean. And that's something that the art world really celebrates. For whatever reason, the contemporary art world wants to see their artists be a wreck and to watch them like in these states of misery. And I think that it's because we celebrate that drama. That's where so much of our stories come from in our movies and things like that. But I don't know, like I consider my life to be precious, and being an artist is
It
a
is.
precious part of that, but I want to be able to enjoy my
Yeah.
life and live in a healthy way and in a balanced way. I've definitely,
Yeah.
like when I was younger, I looked up to, artists that were on that more self-destructive path, and I thought like, yeah, that's cool, like that's edgy. But yeah, nowadays I'm not that into that, I think.
Someone said, "Does real life suffering make better art?" And I think the way I would think about it, I do think suffering I mean, in some sense, who would you be if you had never, like, for the growth of empathy and compassion, and I think, who would you be if you had never suffered over anything? But I just feel like the flip side of that is you don't need to seek it out. Like, we all live in a giant meat grinder of a universe. Like, part of me feels like, and I know this isn't what you asked, but some people, I think, put their suffering on a pedestal um, because it will fuel their art. But I think it's like you might as well do everything you can to feel good and to live a balanced life because that stuff's going to come anyway. If you love anybody, if you are paying even the slightest bit of attention, or even if you're not, eventually it's going to hit you around the head. I don't feel any need to seek that out. I tend to think more like, more the opposite, like I'm like you, I do more of what I like to do when I'm feeling better and I enjoy it more. So, um, God, my voice is cracking. I sound like a teenager.
Yeah.
There was a question here that I liked. Da, 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 da,
Well,
oh, I don't
just
know.
to say something about that too, I think that, suffering is inherent in life. You can't avoid suffering. And in trauma and in suffering, there is the potential to use that as fuel to alchemize into enlightening experience. and to gain wisdom from those types of experiences. And I believe that greater works of art, or works of art that have more value, do come out of those, that they do come out of wisdom. So in a way, experiencing some kind of trauma could potentially make your works of art better. But I agree, I don't think it should be something that you run towards. But historically, there have been a lot of great artists who did experience a lot of trauma within their lifetimes, and that did give their work greater depth or more vitality or something like that.
There used to be, I mean, there were when I was like going through some like I had like I'm pretty sure I would have had clinically like generalized anxiety disorder where I mean from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, it was like tightness in chest, having panic attacks where I like called an ambulance because I thought I was having a heart attack kind of stuff, and it was like triggered by a few things and lasted a couple of years. And there was something about when you're in a kind of pain, most things feel uninteresting, and it created this filter where for something to seem meaningful or worthwhile to me, it had to kind of pass a barrier of most things didn't. And there's a sense in which I think being in touch with these kind of things can kind of sharpen your discernment for deciding what is worth working on. Like in some sense, I mean, mushrooms will help your anxiety. Yeah. Well, no, I'm feeling good now. Yeah, they probably will. They do. But like I do sometimes think like if you are just stoked about everything, like if just you're so self-satisfied with any line you put on a page, that's got to feel amazing, but it makes it maybe a little harder to have some discernment or judgment about what is, air quotes good or that you want to make. So I do sometimes feel like having a bit of a barrier that it's hard to get by in your own attention can be sort of useful. But yeah, no, we're all trying to feel good. I think it's an act of love to try and transform pain into something beautiful. I mean, that's since I was like I had a really lucky childhood, like a beautiful childhood, really. But as long as I've known, I like the rain, I like the color blue, I like sad music. It's just melancholy is what's beautiful to me. And it often feels like um, if we, like, I guess I feel the sense of, like, it is about expressing love, but in it by defining its opposite. Like, we're trying to, um, it's like if you can, I guess it's like an existentialist in me. Like, if you can face the world as it is and retain your optimism, that feels like real optimism. I don't want to have to put myself in a bubble where I'm afraid to know what the world is really like. But I'm also so aware that I am so fucking naive. When you read about the things people go through, like the depths that life delivers, I feel like a fucking child. Like when you read about the kinds of, and maybe that anxiety is what drives anxiety for me generally. Is like it's not even that. Like I know that I'm lucky, and that can become a kind of self-loathing. You look at yourself like a spoiled child, but it's the sense of, oh my God, how could I, like life is just too real sometimes. So like often for me in going to those places in artwork, it's about trying to go where the things you're afraid of looking at and seeing if you can find something beautiful or poetic about them. Um, and I don't know, yeah, like I don't want to claim to be some sort of, it feels weird sometimes going there. Like, do I have the right to make this image, knowing that I haven't really lived this? But I feel like, on some sense, we kind of all know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Maybe that's not too. I don't know.
I think we're more empathetic than we give ourselves credit for, and that we're all in this pool of human experience together, and
Yeah,
therefore we're all sharing our experiences. So even if you're not directly on a personal level experiencing something, you're able to share that experience with somebody else who's having it, and empathize with it, and you can still use that as inspiration. I've also always been really fascinated with and really enjoyed melancholy in my music and in the kind of art that I enjoy. Yeah, I don't know what that is, but yeah, it's like I've always gravitated towards that for some reason.
Me and Jake have exactly the same birthday
Yeah,
to the
we
day,
do.
to the year,
March 21st represent. Yeah, it's
90.
funny because I talked to I talked to my friend Fida today, who's an astrologer and really gifted speaker, and she's also born on March 21st. And I probably know like three people with that birthday, and you two are two of the three. So it's like, what are the
I have to
chances?
confess to be so closed-minded about astrology. Like, I love the symbolism, but I just can't ever get into it. And I always feel mean about that because I love that people are like getting something from it. But it's like one of those things I can't connect to it somehow, and it just feels um a lot of it just feels like why wouldn't astrology show up in all kinds of like mass data? You know, you would see structure to, do you know what I mean? Like the I don't know, and but fuck it. I love it. I love the
Well,
symbolism. I love it as a kind of
you should
thing to
listen
look
to the
at.
talk we did because we went into that a bit. I think you and I have had this conversation before about astrology and like debated it a little bit. I think of it more as a synchronicity. It's not so much like there is like the planets are this way and therefore it creates causality in this reality, but more there's a synchronicity between the planets being aligned in a certain way and there is the events happening that sometimes there is like that cross point that you could observe. And it's really complex. I think there's something like 1300 or like 1700 different planetary influences. So it's very
Right.
nuanced and very subtle. And it's a subject that I know a bit about, but very, very, very little considering how deep of a subject it actually is. And I mean, there's been so much invested into it that I would be pretty amazed if it would be discovered that that pursuit for thousands of years was completely in vain. And I think it's also relating to archetypes, so like the planets are archetypes. They represent kind of like these broad forces. They're symbols for what we experience in life, in the cosmos, and as humans. And it was an ancient way of trying to explain these large forces that govern our lives through symbols. You know?
I think I have a way of putting it. So sometimes, whether it's astrology or tarot or most religions, I often think there's a beautiful meme complex, right? And like you said, there's definitely symbolically like maybe like new ways of seeing and understanding yourself. But it always, whenever someone's lore about the world starts to sound like lore for a, it's like, and this is when it becomes too complicated, like, and then this thing is this thing and this thing is this thing, and it starts to feel so arbitrary to me. And I always have this sense that whatever is going on is somehow going to be complexity emerging from very simple principles. That's what I find very beautiful and poetic about mathematics and physics, and often like about Buddhism as well, is that it comes from this place of um, that a lot of complexity can emerge from incredibly simple principles evolving over time. And I have some sense that um, yeah, I don't know. It happens every time. It happens pretty frequently in the evolution of ideas in science that every time something starts to feel like when they were filling out the periodic table of elements and they were just discovering more and more elements, and it began to feel like this arbitrary list of, the different kind of Lego bricks that reality can be made of. The big revelation was seeing this underlying structure that they fit into and that all of these particles were made of another set of smaller subatomic particles. And again, complexity was found to re-emerge from some simplicity. And I guess I always have this kind of bias that things ring more true for me when they rely on less arbitrary concepts and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I often feel like whatever it is that is sort of governing reality will probably not feel particularly human or expected. Like somehow it will be something alien and beautifully simple, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's the whole. I don't know. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm very. And I say this while sounding judgmental, but I am genuinely non-judgmental, and I love knowing what people. Yeah, like it would probably be good for me to just go and like, instead of reading just the kind of straw man version that people take down, to actually see what people who are really into it believe,
Yeah.
just for the sake. I often it's the same reason I love reading alternative religious worldviews or mythologies, because I feel like they just all have the best memes. Like it's often really, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
And you can see sort of human nature reflected in the, like you said, the desire for understanding, the things people wanted to make sense of, and I find that very beautiful too, and inspiring artistically, to know the things that we've always struggled with. And
Yeah. So
I
we
think
have
brain juices.
we have like we have a minute left. I think that that's a good place to kind of land things. Yeah, it is. I know there's been like a theme throughout this conversation. We've touched upon it, which is like we bring meaning to this kind of this mirror that is life, and I think that what you were talking about with astrology reflects that as well. But yeah, man, thank you so much. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, much love, everyone. Create your own meaning. Enjoy making art.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Be
Be
nice.
nice.
Thanks for
Be
watching
nice
the
to Jake.
conversation. I'm gonna be posting this. I'll send it to you when it's up so people can watch it later. But yeah, man, enjoy the rest of
Good
your
luck
day.
out on the planet. Much love.
Much love.
Bye.
Yep. So we did it, guys. That was another episode of the Quarantine Sessions podcast. I am the host. My name is Jake Cobrin. I want to thank you again for tuning in and listening to this episode, and I hope that this was a valuable experience for you. If you're interested, you can watch these podcasts live on Instagram. I am doing between 3 and 4 live podcasts per week. And if you want to find that, my Instagram account is _.cobrin._, just for aesthetic embellishment. And please subscribe to this podcast so that you can be notified of further episodes. And that's about it. Many blessings to you wherever you might be. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Be well.